death is a second away. People die every 5 minutes from a fentanyl overdose in America. There's 200 a day. It's a plane crash every day that's happening, and we're not doing anything about it, right? And so that's why we're here. The old way is out. The game's changed, the drugs changed, intervention has changed, and treatment's got to change.
This episode of Die Sober discusses sensitive topics that may be triggering to some viewers. If you are experiencing an emergency and need help, please call 911 or contact the National Suicide Hotline at 988.
For non-emergency assistance, please use us as a resource. Visit us at thefirmaddictionconsulting.com, or for more information, call us 615-210-6703. Welcome back, everybody, to the latest episode of the Die Sober podcast. Today, Zach and I are joined by our colleague and good buddy, Skip Stokes.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
It's been a while since we've gotten to catch up. And last we left it, I knew you were in documentary mode. You were filmmaking mode.
I am. Yeah. And I'm still in that mode. We had a rough 23 with some family losses. And so I kind of had to put that on the side burner. But now I'm back working on the film Shame on Us.
Shame on Us. And that film is about a topic dear to all of our hearts, right? It's the stigma around addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. The shame on us in itself is a double entendre, right? Because when we live in addiction, we're experiencing shame 24/7. But it's also looking at, is there a societal approach that could reduce that stigma? Mm-hmm. And if that were the case, would this actually help the cause of sobriety? And so there's, I don't want to be rude, but I kind of want the audience to feel a little bit of, shame on us for not doing our part in this.
Right. Well, if you were to compare another chronic illness or a disease like cancer to addiction, right?
Yeah.
If you and I are tight and you're not going to see your cancer doc and keep up with appointments, I'm just going to throw a bag over your ass and I'm going to take you to the doctor.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Now, you're borderline personality disorder and you got a cocaine habit. I'm not sure I'm doing that.
Right.
Right. We can't talk about it. I wouldn't go enlist my other friends because there's a lot of shame around it.
Right. Well, and when I was interviewing Megan, she used the analogy of the defibrillator at the airport. Right. And so someone's having cardiac issues and they need help. You're not making a moral evaluation on that person in that moment.
Right.
You're going and getting help. Right. And I take that a step further because I always like to just add a little bit more to it.
Because are you extra? Do you identify as extra?
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. I take it a little bit further. The guy could be falling on the floor, have Krispy Kreme donuts in one hand and a double cheeseburger in the other hand, and I'm still not making a moral evaluation on that man's character or who he is or what he has to offer to society. I'm just trying to save a life. Mm-hmm. And there is where the stigma lies for me. Because I'm not going to do that. If I'm basic society, I'm not going to do that for somebody that seems to be in an overdose situation.
Right. So this is probably a year ago. I'm turning onto Charlotte from the Starbucks, right? And I see a guy go off the road and hit a phone pole. Mm-hmm. I don't know why he did it. I just know that he did it. And I'm the first person to see it. So I go over there and I jump out and I take one look at him and it looks like he's badly hurt. And he appeared to be dazed and I didn't know if he needed to be Narcan. So I Narcaned him. And if you were to profile someone who is struggling with addiction, this guy fit the bill.
Yeah, he was.
Right? He fit the bill. And as he came out, right, he responded. He said, "You think I'm a drug addict, don't you?" And I said, "No, man. I thought you were in an overdose." Right, and that was what was truly real for me.
Yeah.
I didn't have a thought about, does this guy have an issue? I just thought he was in trouble.
Right.
Right. But even the guy receiving aid seemed to be in shame over the fact that he needed aid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, that's amazing, man. It really speaks to the stigma that is that is palpable in our society.
Well, yeah, so we're really in my soapbox right now, or on my soapbox.
Good, get on it.
Because, you know, if you look back, at the early 1900s with the Harrison Act, and the Harrison Act vilifying and outlawing heroin and the things that the Harrison Act brought about. But then you look in conjunction with that act being passed and the media of the time taking out a very robust campaign. I can't believe this. This is how they deemed addicts at that time: deviant, crime-prone, weak-willed, moral failures. Mm-hmm. That's over 100 years ago, y'all. Mm-hmm. And yet, if you think about it today, how does society see the addict? Deviant, crime-prone, weak-willed, moral failures. We're still riding that wave as a society. We're riding it in the medical world. We're riding it in schools. We're riding it. I had a conversation the other day with a guy involved with bringing recovery to campuses. And I learned about the fact that we can't even have Narcan on the campuses.
Where's this?
This is local. This was a guy here in town who works with campuses to get recovery allyship on campuses. Mm-hmm. And they still can't get past the hurdle of Narcan being available on college campuses.
That blows my mind.
We were just talking about this the other day. We've got this thing where if there's a fire extinguisher, there should be Narcan.
If there's a defibrillator,
right,
there should be Narcan.
Right.
I mean, there is, fortunately, when some of us are on those campuses.
Right.
Because it's on our person. Right. But to not have that available in every single dormitory and every single student activity center blows my mind.
It blows the mind. And we've had metro schools here in Nashville, in the grade schools, have had a fentanyl overdose.
Yeah.
They had a multi-overdose in one setting last spring, I believe. That's the most recent that I know of. That doesn't mean there hasn't been more.
But Narcan, rather, encourages the behavior of drug use.
Says Stigma.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so as a filmmaker, and specifically in this film, though I am a fella in sobriety myself, I really try my hardest, even when I'm in edit mode, when I'm in interview mode, when whatever, I try to remind myself that I still have those stigmatizing views as well. And so I kind of go out of my way to not say they talk about addicts this way. I try to keep myself in that boat because I'm still under construction, right? And I'm still part of society. And so I have to keep in that lane in order to be honest in my approach, because otherwise I can just vilify society and it's all their fault. And the three of us, I would say no, that it's in fact not just society's fault that we have a past in addiction. But they didn't help in certain ways that they could have.
But that's interesting, because if I sit here and say we, and I identify for us as a we are in recovery.
Right.
We are recovery professional. We are treatment professionals, and we are part of the greater society. Right. So we've kind of fit two of the three distinct roles. Right. Mm-hmm. So we have views from legitimately 360 degrees around it. Right. I'm not a political person, and this is not a political show, but it's hard to look at, going back to the Harrison Act, right?
Sure.
Drug addicts are looked at in a harsher light than alcoholics.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I just drink.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I'm a guy with an alcohol use disorder, and I look down my nose at people that were doing drugs.
Well, that was my thing for forever. Yeah. Like, I snort cocaine. Crack is for drug addicts. Nice. I'm just a party kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The people who knew me better would tell you otherwise.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I was more than just a party kid.
Yeah.
I was a dumpster for substance. But it's funny, and we talk to families all the time, and we go through a questionnaire and interview the family. What does your son or daughter, loved one, What are they taking? Are they taking street drugs? Are they taking prescription drugs? Are they drinking? Oh no, it's just alcohol.
Right.
He's not an addict.
Right.
Thank God he's not an addict.
Yeah.
Right. I think we get it a little bit deeper here. You know, we are in the Bible Belt. So there's just that added little extra bit of juice,
Yeah.
you know, on the shame factor. But the way our society works is, especially now, social media, as hard as it is, it's hard to grow up, right? So take a kid from a normal family. I don't think
whatever that means.
Whatever the fuck that means. Take a kid from a normal family. You got mom and dad in the house. You got a couple siblings. This kid's life can be difficult for no other reason than he's just 12.
Yeah.
Right? Dad works a normal job. You know, he's home in the evenings. Mom's got a normal job. She's home. It doesn't take any special set of influences to set someone on a path of emotional need to medicate, medicating turning into a pattern turns into addiction. Mm-hmm. Right? Like that's just roll the dice. That's a great percentage out there. Now bring in fentanyl and these new opioids. It's a new ball game. And
it scares me.
It's one thing we've talked about since the jump of this show is it is a new ball game. And from your perspective, like I've always said, well, Skip is the stigma. He's the pro around stigma, right? So I would love your take. You have this new drug user, right?
Yeah.
This new wave of drug users who are just beginning to even experiment with drugs, right? And let's say there's a red flag. Mom, dad fail to react, or family system fails to react because of the stigma around it. And now you have these substances that are instantly addictive.
Yeah.
So it's the perfect intersection for a giant clusterfuck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and that's why we're seeing 200 people a day die.
There's this heart-wrenching moment in one of the interviews that we did where the parent says, you know, I didn't call my mom. I didn't call a friend. I didn't call anybody I knew to say, help me with my son and his addiction, which I would have done for anything else for the safety and well-being of my child.
And the thing too is like the kids pick up on that.
Yeah.
They really, I mean, there's no secret. I mean, I can think of times even in my own personal experience in my recovery, there was one Christmas in particular where I was sitting in Dauphin County Prison and I was there for quite a while. And, you know, like you got Christmas dinner and everyone calls grandma and grandpa. And then, you know, it gets to supposed to be my turn. And my mom, God bless her. She's, Zach's traveling right now. So he's just not home right now. He's traveling. I'm in an orange jumpsuit,
right,
sitting in Dauphin County Prison. And, and I'm hoping maybe you could speak some to this because this is one of my main questions to you would be along the lines of, anytime we look at alcoholism and drug addiction particularly, right, we do have people out there that use a little bit more recreationally, and those who are more along the lines of like the real addict that we mostly talk about. Right. And when you look among that population of the real addict, the real alcoholic, like we see that genetic difference, right? Where it's like when they find it, this was gonna happen. Sure, there's usually a catalyst. But once they find that thing, that drink or that drug, genetic disposition off to the races. And that's really like 10% of us. And I'm wondering how much we do see some drug users, given the right reason or, you know, the right warning, they stop. Mm-hmm. Or they curb their use and they, you know, titrate down to something that's maybe less immediately dangerous, like smoking weed or whatever. And then you have that remaining 10% who just no matter what can't stop. So and what I'm wondering is, within your documentary and within your filmmaking and all the experience that you do have you noticed that one kind of perpetuates like this cyclical pattern of stigma between the general society and how hard it is to differentiate between those two groups of addicts when they're actually using?
Yeah, what a great question. So there's my brain is racing right now. There's a brilliant book, and it's not even a book. It's a collection of writings from medical professionals across the United States and the world. And it's called The Stigma of Addiction. It's like a $75, $78 book. It's that thick. And it's just medical terminology all the way through it. So it's not an easy read. I mean, you're constantly there going, okay, what's that word mean? What's that word mean?
Right.
But it is just chocked full of information on specifically the stigma of addiction. So Dr. Stephen Lloyd, who I know you are familiar with, I love his approach talking about the biopsychosocial model because he reduces it down to the slot machine, right? And so he talks about genetically. So you're talking about the genetics, my biology, my chemistry, my makeup, who I am as a person. So if that comes up with substance use disorder in the past, then that 7 rolls up, right? And this is not my stuff. I'm totally stealing his stuff right now. But if I'm going to steal anybody's stuff, it's going to be Dr. Stephen Lloyd. And the second is the psychological makeup, right? Is there trauma? Are there things in the past? Did something happen to that person requiring the medication that I'm genetically predisposed to not have good reactions with over a long period of time? And then the social element of it being the availability or the acceptability of that substance, right? And so when you hit that slot machine and they all roll 7s, you got a really good shot. Now, the problem inside of that with the stigmatizing views are we have gone from we're barely, as a society in 2024, we're barely talking about a biopsychosocial model. We're barely talking about the fact that there's 3 contributing factors. The majority of people are still on a moral failing.
Right. Yeah.
Right? And so there's a morality base in there. Then if you go to, and this is where it gets really in the weeds, if you go to the consideration that it's a disease, which I'm all for recognizing it as a disease, but it's an uncurable disease. And oftentimes what doctors and psychologists and the like are finding is that when I know that I have this disease, and in my case, alcohol use disorder, I'm still living under the stigma and the shame of I can't drink like other people, right? And so when you take it to that next step and you talk about that 3-prong approach, it gives me hope and understanding that, yeah, this might be the cards that I was dealt, but I have a workable solution. Are you with me?
Right.
And so society still on the moral. I'll give you an example. This is how I pitch my film when I'm in a conversation with people who identify as non-addicts. All right. I say, well, it's 3 stories of 3 young men from very similar backgrounds, same demographics, almost down the line. The first young man, after a year of sobriety, was reuniting with a bunch of friends out of town. And they all left to go get food, and he raided the medicine cabinet in this house, and he took the wrong concoction of items from that medicine cabinet and overdosed and died. The second story is about a young man who struggled for quite a few years with opioid use disorder as a result of being prescribed opiates for pain from a medical professional. He had a moment where something triggered him, or he had a craving. He went out and bought an OxyContin from somebody that he had purchased from before. That OxyContin was absolutely not OxyContin, and it was a pressed pill with fentanyl. He overdosed and died. The third story is a young man who had a mental health crisis after experiencing something that was traumatic from his past. He had detoxed off of heroin in jail. So poor man's detox. And in that mental health crisis, he went out and shot up heroin the same amount that he usually had done before when his tolerance was up. And he died. That's the whole elevator pitch. And I just sit and I wait for this person who doesn't identify or understand addiction or stigma. And I sit and I let them sit with that for a second. And then I say to them, now, when I told you those 3 stories, you categorized those 3 people in lesser than and greater than. You just did. I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm just calling it what it is.
Right.
And here's the thing that's really interesting about that conversation, the many times that I've had it. No one's ever come back and said, okay, Skip, so what order did I put them in? They know. Right. They know deep down in their knowing knower, they know what they just did. That's the stigma of addiction. Right there. And so that's the project that I'm working on, is I'm somehow trying to put a mirror up to society's face and go, I need you to look at the ugly. Because we've all looked at the ugly. We know what the ugly looks like. But seemingly the only time a mom, and this is going to seem hurtful, and it comes from a place of a loving heart, but seemingly the only time you get a family dialed into overdose awareness is when they've lost a child. And the irony of that is that all these parents and families that are working so hard for overdose awareness, the reason they're working so hard for overdose awareness is so that other families don't experience it.
Right.
So we're in this just cycle. We're in this cyclical place. And it all comes back to, it's either a moral issue or it's a disease, which means that there's really no cure because it's a non-curable disease. So if it's a non-curable disease, well, this is just a lot in life I have, or I'm a moral failure. I'm a deviant, crime-prone, weak-willed moral failure, which I wish they would have done a different ad campaign because that's hard to say.
Weak-willed, crime-prone, moral failure.
You forgot deviant.
Oh, one of our back in the day, we had a neighbor who didn't enjoy being next to one of my sober livings.
Oh yeah,
and
shocker.
And we always took the approach that, hey, we want to be the best neighbor you can have.
Yeah.
So day one, I'm knocking on the door. We've got treats, business cards. Like, hey, if you get a dog loose, you got a log in you got a limb fall in your driveway. We want to be the people you call. We've got men in recovery next door. We pride ourselves. We want to be there for you. We want to help. I remember this seemingly sweet looking older lady looked at me and said, "You keep those sex-addled, crime-ridden drug addicts out of my yard."
Yeah.
I said, "Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
We sure will."
Yeah.
Sex-addled, drug-ridden crime addicts, whatever she said.
Yeah.
It's like, how long has she waited to say that?
Right.
Yeah. To me, the stigma is just pointless, right? Because we've been over the numbers recently,
And often.
Yeah. So around 50 million suffer from, 50 million Americans suffer from a substance use disorder.
Right.
And about 50 more million suffer from a mental health disorder.
Yeah.
And then there's the double winners.
Yeah.
That are about 30 million that have co-occurring. That means pretty much everybody is affected.
Yeah.
In one off. You're going one domino away, and your life has likely been affected by someone who has a mental health disorder and or addiction.
Yeah.
So why is it still taboo to talk about it? Why can I feel for you if you have a rare form of cancer, but I cut you off if you've got an addiction you can't shake?
Yeah. So the answer to that question, if I may,
Please.
is Karen Moran, who's a LADAC here in town. I love this human being. Karen Moran is one of the greatest human beings to walk the face of the earth. When I interviewed her, she said, I was on a flight the other day, and it seemed like a day-long flight from LA to New York, because I sat down next to the guy next to me, and he asked me what I did for a living. And I explained what I did. And he proceeded to tell me over the course of the next, I don't know how many hours, how it's not a disease, it's a moral failing, that it's horrible. And she said, through a little bit of digging, I realized that his father was an alcoholic and he just needed him to be an asshole.
Yeah.
Just needed him to be an asshole.
Yeah. Well,
right?
It's unfortunate that for many of us who struggle with substance use, we tend to have behaviors that turn away our loved ones and can turn away people that we don't know, right? We do commit a little bit of crime. We do.
I don't know what you're talking about. I own a fire hydrant.
Maybe I'm the only
on-
one.
I own a fire hydrant over on Blakemore Avenue. I'm very proud of that.
You own it?
I own it. Yeah, I bought it.
Okay.
Yeah, I bought it.
Look at you, man.
Right.
Look at
Yeah.
we've come far.
Yeah.
So, we have symptomology that turns people away from us, right? But if I was just, I'm going back to cancer. If I was just a straight up asshole because I had cancer, right? Or you're a straight up asshole because you had cancer, your mom would have told your grandmother that you were just not feeling well.
Yeah, 100%.
She wouldn't have to make it up. My mom actually told the same story to my grandmother, both of them when they were still alive. The story was I was working on the oil rigs. I'd ridden the barges at one point, so that was the story. He's on the barges again,
Yeah.
Well, the jig's up with my family now.
Yeah,
But it's subtle. It's subtle. And if you really pay attention, you can see the subtlety of it. Because of the opioid epidemic and because of how much happened as a result of the overprescription and misunderstanding of what OxyContin and those things could do, there's more sympathy for someone with an opioid use disorder as a result of being prescribed pain medicine than there is heroin. And it goes back to, there's this great quote from Dr. Tony Campolo, who was a professor at somewhere in Pennsylvania. Brilliant theological mind. And so let's use some theology to intersperse with our moral failings. He said, a movement can exist without a God, but never without a devil. There has to be an enemy to defeat. And so you think about that in the context of our social media world, in the context of our kill the beast mentality, from Beauty and the Beast. Our village rampage is not about what we're for, it's what we're against, right? So when you present to me that the Sackler family are the evil villain, I can root with you against that.
Right.
Right? But I'm not rooting for you in your struggle.
I just want them to get what they got coming.
They need to get what they got coming.
Right.
But I'm still not rooting for you in your struggle. When I'm sitting in a room, because I go to these super secret rooms from time to time and have meetings.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in a room and
Are
somebody
they
says,
like classes?
Yeah, they're like classes, life classes. And I'm sitting in a room and somebody stands up and picks up 30 days. I've been around the block a little bit. I've had a few days in a row of being sober. But I look at that person and I think, how the hell did you do that?
Right.
How did you do 60 days in a row? And it keeps me humble. I know that they did it with support. I know that they did it with a community. Dr. Stephen Lloyd again, what does he always say? The opposite of addiction is connection.
Connection.
I know they did it with somebody else. And oftentimes they're doing it in the dark from their family because their family wants nothing to do with them. And it takes years for that to change, if it ever changes.
Yeah.
So I know that there is a community that loves them, but there's a society. Think about how many times you watch a movie and in order to make a character more interesting, they give them a substance use disorder.
Yeah.
That's the only reason the substance use disorder is in the story. It's just to make them a more complex individual. And what do they always do inside that story arc? They go back.
Yeah.
You never see.
They have a great life circumstance that sets them apart from the need to medicate.
Right.
And then frequently there's the thing that they just can't conquer. Right. And so here comes old friend alcohol, old friend pills, old friend blow, old friend whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it makes the character more interesting.
I know I was definitely more
insidious.
interesting with a crippling cocaine
It's insidious.
addiction.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yeah, to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, going back to what you just said.
Am I answering your questions? I mean, I might be way out in the middle of
No.
field.
You're right on. You're right, actually, on the target. I'm over here just one, digesting what you said, and two, like having another question of my own. And this might, whatever, fuck it, might piss some people off, but I don't particularly care too much. What I'm wondering too is, you know, especially in today's treatment world.
Okay.
You know, there's no secrets here. Like I've been to treatment half a dozen times, and you know, one of the main things it seems like at almost every treatment center, at some point we would have, you know, somebody who works there, and you know, everyone's sitting in the room and do the old, you know, look to your left and look to your right, and you know, you can count that the probability that they won't be here anymore within a year is high, right? And then other treatment centers being, you know, only 1 in 10 of you are going to make it, right? And it once again, it just sends this message. And I'm just thinking, based on what you said, me sitting in that chair and being like, what the hell am I doing here then anyways? Right? Like, why don't we just go get good and loaded right now?
Right.
Because you're telling me that, hey, homie, like 90% chance, like you're going to be dead in a year. And I'm kind of like looking at my watch thinking,
fuck it, we may as well go ahead and kick it.
You see what I'm saying? And you know, I'm wondering too, like when you were talking about the biopsychosocial and you used the slot machine reference.
Stephen Lloyd's slot machine. Yeah.
You know, that also, you know, triggered that same question of, you know, I wonder how much is still perpetuated even inside an area where there's supposed to be treatment and you know, guys with these issues are supposed to be trying to get well. There's even inside of that, you can still find stigmatizing statements.
Right.
Absolutely.
Did you ever go to treatment?
I never went to treatment. Okay. I go to treatment quite often because I go out to meet with guys, but I was never in treatment.
Mine was different. You know, most guys go on vacation once a year with their family.
Right.
I had a Blue Cross Blue Shield card that I went there once a year, it seems like.
But talking about stigma, I can remember being in treatment. I went a lot. I can remember being inside treatment and hearing guys' stories and comparing my own and going, oh, I'm not as fucked as this guy.
Oh, yeah, that's a great,
Right?
Yeah.
Or even going to some life classes, secret life classes, and hearing somebody sharing, I'm sitting there going, man.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not as fucked as this guy either.
Yeah. And I should. Yeah. I had that in the rooms. Like, I had that almost immediately. Like, oh, I never did that. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know,
maybe I don't need to be here.
Yeah, maybe I'm not ready for this.
Maybe this is an overreaction.
Yeah. I think it still stems from, the morality issue of it. I think it still stems from that. I think it's so deeply ingrained. If you think about the fact that we started this conversation or earlier on said that those attributes that were painted by the media in like 1917 and how we still carry them, it's going to take a long time. Think about that as a drug.
Yeah.
Think about how long it's going to take to detoxify our body from those things. Right. And so it's going to be a slow, long, arduous journey, not unlike that of a path to sobriety. It's just society doesn't know how to take that medicine.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. You know, and then you get into, I mean, if you really want to get in the paint, you know, then you get into the conversations about harm reduction. At the end of the day, if you ask me what's my perspective on anything, I don't care if you ask me about fentanyl test strips. I don't care if you ask me about supervised consumption sites. I don't care if you ask me about anything. At the end of the day, my buoy that's out in the middle of the ocean, that's keeping me centered on something, are they going to live to see tomorrow? Yeah. That's my starting point. Are they going to live to see tomorrow? You know, one of the guys in our film, I'm going to try to do this without breaking up.
We got Kleenexes.
He was in a, it's not because I'm embarrassed of crying. I'm just an ugly crier.
So is he.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
He was in a shooting gallery one night with a friend, and his friend she was desperately wanting to get, and I hate to use the phrase, but I'm going to use it because these are her words. She was desperately wanting to get clean. I hate that word. It drives me nuts, that word. As opposed to what? Dirty.
Right.
Right? Yeah. I don't like that terminology. But she was desperately wanting to get clean, but she also knew that she would not make it to the morning if she didn't use. And so this kid, who's part of this story that I'm telling in this film, said, okay, I'm okay. I'm going to not use, and I'm going to stay awake all night to make sure that you're okay so that tomorrow you can go and get help. Mm-hmm. Excuse my French, but that's a fucking hero.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a hero. That's a celebratory moment. That's an individual in the throes of their addiction saying, all I want to do is give you a chance to see tomorrow. Yeah. We're not celebrating that. Instead, we're vilifying that individual. Because, by the way, when I brought that up earlier about the three characters that are in the story, he's the one y'all put on the bottom.
Mm. And it's funny. I know who's on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's different with addicts and alcoholics. Right. It's different with people with substance use disorders and alcohol use disorders. It's different for us because we're able to course correct very quickly and recognize that it's a level playing field.
But we know we all three knew who the bottom guy was.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody's got a heart or needle, it's game over.
Everybody's got a heart for medicine cabinet guy.
Right?
That could be anybody.
Yeah.
You go into mental health crisis. Oh, taboo.
Yeah.
He's nuts.
Yeah.
And he shot heroin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Guy who got a pill, it wasn't what he was supposed to get. You got a bad deal.
Yeah.
Right? So he's in the middle.
Or it's murder, or it's homicide, or it's manslaughter.
Right.
Or but again, we can, and I say this with a lot of pain in my own self. We say that because we want justice. We want justice for that lost life.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time thinking about, how can we, that there should be, not so much like what can we do, like making a statement, but like, if you sell hot bags, should you be held accountable? And I've had a couple of different stances on it. And I say that as a person who sold drugs a lot.
Yeah.
So it's like justice or mercy. I don't know if I killed anybody.
Right.
Could I afford the justice on that?
Right.
No.
But then ask yourself this question. This is what kind of keeps me tethered on that, because I don't have a firm stance one way or the other. Is it going to become War on Drugs Part 2?
Yeah.
Because that seemingly...
In my gut reaction, just knee-jerk thought is yes.
Yeah.
But hold on. Let's. What if we rephrase the war on drugs to be checking on children's emotional well-being early on instead of learning about the fucking French,
instead of just
the French
no.
Renaissance painters. No. I'm talking about instead of fucking art history or whatever elective bullshit that we can now exclude from the curriculum. What if there were trained professionals in schools across the country that were doing emotional check-ins multiple times a week with school kids?
Yeah.
So that emotional regulation became part of the curriculum, therefore lessening the need to medicate.
Right.
right? In my mind, so we're one generation away from having a generation of kids that could actually work their way through life stressors with help.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's the war on drugs.
That'd be great.
Right?
I think it would be great, but it's also going to come with a societal stigma within that school system amongst kids themselves.
No, but just think about it. In the last few years, the word therapy has become cool.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody that I know is now a mental health professional almost because they know a few hot terms on Instagram.
Hell, I don't know any hot terms.
Everybody I know can spot a narcissist. Everybody I know can talk.
What are you trying to say right now?
I'm trying to say that there's a lot of bullshit out there on social media platforms. However, people are becoming more and more open to talking about their issues.
Yeah.
Which I think is starting to melt the ice.
Yeah, and I think that will start to melt the ice there. Mental illness is certainly being talked about a lot more.
It's cool to identify as anxiety or depressed. It's more out in the open. It's not cool, but it's more out in the open.
Yeah. I can dive into the it's more out in the open. It is more socially acceptable. Mm-hmm. It is more understood from that perspective. And so now we just need to take that one more step and make it understandable that someone is dealing. You know, what's the basic, the simplest answer for addiction? What is addiction? Addiction is the continued use of a substance despite consequences.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's addiction. That's the easiest answer I've ever been told. That's the easiest one.
That's the one I roll with too.
Addiction is continual use despite consequences. If I can get my head wrapped around that, mm-hmm. then I have a chance as society to recognize that this is not a deviant, crime-prone, weak-willed moral failure.
If you look at it, my view on this has grown over the years. Mental health, addiction.
Okay.
So I look at addiction as a symptom of mental illness.
Okay.
It's a disease. I don't fight the disease model. It certainly is a disease. It's a disease that I fight daily on my own.
Right.
Right. But in the treatment world, we used to look at it, you know, when I entered the treatment world 11, 12 years ago, whatever, you had, oh, he's just a straight alcoholic or he's just a straight drug addict. Oh, but this guy's got anxiety and depression. So he's co-occurring. We need a dual diagnosis facility for him. I don't know the last time we've had a straight up just addiction, no anxiety, no depression, no PTS, no trauma, right? It's one and the same. Mm. And I would love for somebody to come on here and fight me on that. It's all one and the same.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. Like,
and I'm not, just for the record, I'm not pushing against the disease model. I'm just recognizing that inside the disease model, to view it that way still leaves room for stigma. And I also don't think that the biopsychosocial is the solution. Mm-hmm. I just think it's another step.
Yeah, I'm not fighting you at all.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't misunderstood there. No, it is. I'm on the disease train.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Often called the crazy train. I'm sorry, you probably can't pay for that.
But, you know, like but I think if we had a 5-step plan to reduce stigma in the United States of America in 2024, I think part of that would be to have society realize that addiction isn't a moral failing. It isn't a weak-willed issue. They don't just need a second job. Their fucking mental health is in the trash.
Right.
Right. So fight me if you want to on this. I go from this is a common continuation that I see. You have emotional wound.
Okay.
As a young person, right? Or emotional wound, it's whatever age.
Okay.
Maladaptive behavior. right? That could be spending, relationships, attention,
Yeah.
sex,
Yeah.
whatever. Could be for guys like us. It could be maybe some of that, but certainly substances.
Right.
Substances alleviate my emotional wound.
Right.
I continue with the substance.
Right.
That turns over into addiction.
Right.
As you just that's the only addiction definition that I've always used.
Right.
Continuing to use despite mounting consequences.
Right.
Right. And then we dive deeper into shame, more use, more consequences. We just let the snowball of shit roll downhill until we're either dead or we're locked up. Or we have, the magical confluence comes where you get to see somebody get 30 days. They have, they were helped into that position to where they jumped off a dock and they were met.
Yeah.
And I don't know, how do we get there? You've studied it. How do we get around how do we turn that battleship?
So we're working really hard on one of them right now, and we have been for a very long time. So there's three basic places where stigma exists in society. There is the social stigma, there's the institutional stigma, and then there's the self-stigma. And we've done a really great job in a lot of areas, even in those scenarios where you're the 1 in 10 that might have a shot. There's still a lot of good that's happened in there to help reduce that self-stigma a little bit, right?
Agreed.
But that self-stigma is kind of living in the roll-off of these other two, and so it keeps coming, right? Institutionalized stigma, that can be anything from, I don't want my boss to know that I have a drinking problem, to the way that policy is informed and shared. Now, if we think about policy and how it's affected by the moral stigma, you can see how that can happen. And then the social stigma is, here's the thing, guys. If I go out and I have a few beers with my buddies on a Friday night and we're watching a game, I got a little rowdy. It was a long week.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm not as socially stigmatized as my buddy who's sitting right next to me watching me drink into an oblivion, and he goes to the men's room and he walks in and there's this dude standing there at the mirror with a key bump.
Right.
And his brain goes, oh my God, this guy, what's his problem? Right? And so the social stigma there. And so I think that what we've tried to do, and this is just my opinion, what we've tried to do is we've tried to take the course of action of what we're going to do is we're going to clean it up down here and then work our way up the mountain, right? But if you spill soda on your table, what do you clean first?
Table.
The table. Why?
Because it's going to get more on the
It's just
floor.
going to keep going on the floor, right? And so we've done a lot of work down here, but we've not really done a lot of work up here. And I think we're seeing some positive things. I think we're seeing, there's real conversations going on about how we handle this on a policy level, but the policy levels aren't going to change until the social aspect changes. Why? Because the social is who informs who's going to be the policy maker in the first place. And I am getting political. I'm not sharing sides, but I am saying the power is in the society to change its view on the stigmatizing views they have towards substance use disorder. And that will then inform the other two areas. So we've done a lot of really hard work on the wrong side of things.
I think though there's
Sorry to be negative, Ned.
no. This is exactly what I was hoping to that you would share. But think about all of the kind of milestones so addiction's been stigmatized for 100 years.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. All right. When AIDS came out, remember?
Right.
When the AIDS epidemic came out, it was a moral failure.
Absolutely.
Right? Sorry about your medical problems, but you're fucked anyway because you got a moral failure.
Right.
Right. That's why you got this thing.
Right.
Think how far we've come there.
Right.
But it took it took time, and it took a big time celebrity to battle it openly, right? We're all 1 degree of Magic Johnson at this point.
Yeah.
And the views have changed. It's no longer a stigmatized deal, right?
I would agree. I would agree with that.
It's still a delicate medical issue,
right.
but you can talk about it openly.
It's also a treatable medical issue now.
It's a treatable medical issue
because we put a lot of funds in there to solve that.
So, like, to me, the pathway is there. It's proven. Like,
right.
We can be part of a similar answer for addiction. Right. Like, and it takes voices like ours to get it out there so that it is so somebody can open up.
Yeah.
And we may not get a monster celebrity, but in lieu of a monster celebrity, what if people just recovered out loud together? To me, that's the whole purpose of this show. Live today, die sober. Let's talk about how we can get through hard days and we can celebrate good ones.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're doing, and I would assume that was the reason that you started doing this in the first place, is to be a voice for those who need to hear it, and if you're, I would imagine that your hope is, if you're looking at the analytics and you're looking at who's taking in this content, I would imagine that your long-term hope is that the majority of the people that are investing their time to take into what you're sharing are people who aren't addicts, right? That's who you want to talk to, right? And the whole thing with the stigma of addiction and why I had to do this documentary comes back to the only time I ever heard the sentence, we have to talk about the stigma of addiction, was in communities, either overdose awareness meetings or substances in the workplace, or you weren't hearing this outside of the world of addiction and recovery.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, everybody's saying it in here. Why isn't anybody saying it out there?
Right.
So let's try to make a film that puts a mirror up in front of society and say, hey guys, you're in here. Yeah. And it's okay. We've all been ashamed. We know that you can get through it. We'll walk you through it.
Right.
Does that, make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It is one of the goals of this podcast to knock the shit out of the stigma.
Right.
The other goal would be to reach out and kind of bridge the gap for people who think they might be curious about, hey, do I have an issue?
Right.
And I think that stigma's still there. Like, hey, do I have an issue? Even if it makes me feel weird, bad, whatever, clean, dirty. I love that analogy.
Oh, it drives me nuts.
Right?
I also hate hit bottom.
Yeah,
I
have a personal vendetta against that one.
I did have an old timer one time though. He gave me a perspective on it that's changed it a little bit for me. He said, you hit bottom when you lay down the shovel. And I was like, I'm going to take that, because the concept of hitting bottom as it results to alcohol use. Do you realize how much work I would have to do to drink myself to death?
Yeah.
Short of getting in a car and wrapping it around a tree, I got to do a lot of work to drink myself to death.
Yeah, drinking yourself to death sucks. It's like getting kicked to death by a rabbit. It takes a while sometimes.
But all I have to do is go out this door and walk just down the road and buy something from someone, and I'm dead in 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Hitting bottom is a whole different conversation today.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think from where we are, and we're going to try to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Where we are and where we come in is, instead of letting an addict hit bottom, and that's a coffin, I want to raise the floor to meet their feet.
Sure.
Right. Or influence how long someone wants to hold the shovel and keep digging.
Right.
Right. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and that's where harm reduction comes into play for me, is recognizing that we're doing this in steps. We're doing this step by step. And I don't mean steps like in a traditional understanding inside of recovery. I just mean it's a journey. Kind of my working tagline, if you will, about my recovery coaching is A new life is possible. Let's explore it together.
I love that.
Right. And so your journey on this new pathway, you may veer off course for a second. What you're not going to find is you're not going to find a guy on the trail waiting for you to get back who's now going to, ream you or hit you or berate you because you went off trail.
Right.
Right. Let's just keep getting on the trail.
Yeah. I'm thrilled that we got to have you come on and kind of share your perspective on all the things that we hold valuable around stigma and reducing and connecting. We have a lot of the same language.
Sure.
And I didn't ask you to come on because I thought we had a lot of the same language. I asked you to come on for your perspective.
Yeah.
I consider
and I appreciate you all inviting me. Yeah.
Expert on stigma, and I would love for our viewers to be able to find you. So how can we find you?
Yeah. So thank you for that. So the film is called Shame on Us. It was done with my production company 1028. Mm-hmm. But I will say the easiest way to find anything about me or any of the work I'm doing is just skipstokes.com.
skipstokes.com.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. I figured why make it hard?
Why make it hard? Yeah, leave that to us. We got really long URLs. That's all we got today. Thank you, Skip.
Thanks for having me, guys.